Jill Valentine is one of the main protagonists of the Resident Evil series, having the second highest amount of playable appearances in mainline games behind fellow Resident Evil 1 co-star Chris Redfield. Jill's first appearance in Resident Evil was in the very first game as a member of STARS, the Special Tactics and Rescue Service. She was scouted by Albert Wesker and joined the squad's Alpha team, working alongside Chris, Barry Burton, Joseph Frost, and Brad Vickers under Wesker. She became involved with the Spencer Mansion incident that kicked off the events of the first Resident Evil game, serving as the game's easy mode of sorts, having access to more item slots and a lockpick compared to Chris. Over the course of the game, she's assisted by Barry, who delivers some of the most iconic lines in the series relating to Jill.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Just a moment. I found something.
What is it?
It's a weapon. It's really powerful, especially against living things.
After Wesker is revealed as a traitor and Umbrella's doings are laid bare, STARS is forcibly disbanded. Chris goes off to Europe to personally investigate Umbrella's headquarters, while Jill stays behind in Raccoon City to independently investigate as best she can, though most of her efforts are suppressed by the chief of police. Once things hit the fan in Raccoon City though, Jill makes a desperate last escape out of the city during the events of Resident Evil 3. Jill didn't come out unscathed though. She was infected by Nemesis with the T virus, and it's only thanks to a quickly administered vaccine that she was able to survive. After the fall of Umbrella, thanks to a raid by Chris and Jill, and more so some damning legal testimony from Wesker, Jill and Chris helped found the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, or BSAA for short, a counterterrorism unit dedicated to snuffing out bioterrorism worldwide. Jill remained one of their most active operatives, taking part in the Queen Zenobia incident that made up the events of Resident Evil Revelations. One fateful night, on a tip about the location of Albert Wesker, Jill and Chris raid the estate of Oswald Spencer, the founder of Umbrella. They find him, and also Wesker, standing over his corpse. The two engage Wesker, who effortlessly manhandles them. Right before Wesker delivers what would be a killing blow to Chris, Jill tackles Wesker through a window, seemingly to their deaths. They, of course, survive, and Wesker experiments on Jill, discovering that her previous T-virus infection and curing from Resident Evil 3 has made her body produce antibodies entirely unique to her. Antibodies Wesker would harvest to create the Ouroboros virus, which forms the basis of the events of Resident Evil 5. Wesker keeps Jill under his control with a device that amplifies Jill's physical strength and agility, but keeps her aware of her actions, however involuntary. Wesker uses her as his enforcer throughout RE5, culminating in a showdown between Chris and his new BSAA partner Sheva, and himself and Jill. Chris and Sheva are thankfully able to remove the device from Jill, freeing her from the brainwashing. She escapes the facility alongside BSAA operative Josh Stone and also assists in the final boss fight, giving Chris and Sheva the rocket launchers they used to kill Wesker for good. Jill has extensive field experience, having special forces training and incredible dexterity, a trait most prominently showcased with her lockpicking skills, as well as her surprisingly useful skill at playing the piano. Jill's one of the most popular characters in the Resident Evil series, a fact that probably contributed to her appearance as a playable character in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in 2000. Jill represents a lot of firsts for the Versus games. She's the first Resident Evil character in the series, one of the first from a polygonal-based series next to Hayato, Trombone, and Servbot, and notably the first to hail from a game rated mature by the ESRB. Jill's overall design and moveset in Marvel 2 is primarily inspired by the original 1996 Resident Evil. Though some of her moveset is made specifically for this game, a surprising chunk of it can be traced back to that first RE entry. Jill's voice actor in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is Catherine Disher, who also voiced her in Resident Evil 3. She's perhaps best known, at least in regards to the companies involved with this series, for playing Jean Grey in X-Men the Animated Series, as well as voicing Storm, Psylocke, and Spyro in Capcom's Marvel Fighters as well. Jill's moves in this game have been localized differently over Marvel 2's various re-releases over the years, but for the purposes of this video, I'll be going with the move names as displayed in the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. The moves there are directly translated from the move names provided with the arcade and Dreamcast release, so I think it's fair to say these are the official names worldwide. All that said, let's get started. Jill is primarily a rushdown character in Marvel 2, her game plan centering around using her various summons to reliably set up openings for her to start her offense. Jill's one of the earliest available characters in the arcade and most console versions of the game, and she's the one that players of all skill levels can pick up and have a good time with. Her zombie summon is really good. The flaming heavy one in particular is unblockable, and Jill can create some messed up unblockable setups thanks to it. Jill also has a slide that's fast and great for converting OTG light kicks into full combos. And overall, she's a really easy rushdown character to wrap your head around, and one of the first characters I'd recommend for newcomers to get a feel for the game's fundamentals. That said, her assists aren't particularly fantastic. She takes a bit more damage than average, and though her summons can be annoying for the opponent, they have low priority and they won't be winning zoning wars anytime soon. As mentioned earlier, most of Jill's moveset references weapons and enemies from the first Resident Evil game, and this even extends to her non-combat animations as well. For example, if you leave Jill idle for a bit, she'll transition from her standard battle-ready idle animation to a unique one that recreates her idle pose from the first Resident Evil game. Her pre-fight animations will sometimes show her casually tossing a random item. Sometimes it'll be a key, and other times it'll be a small circular object. These are the desk key and ink ribbon items from Resident Evil. Ink ribbons are how characters save their game in the older Resident Evil games, being a consumable item used at typewriters in designated areas. Desk keys are an item in Resident Evil 1 and 2 that predictably open certain locked desks. It's actually a bit funny that Jill has one here. She very explicitly doesn't get them in Resident Evil 1, since she has a lockpick as a passive item there. Chris is the one that usually needs to use these instead. One of her victory animations also shows her setting up and lighting a flare. This one is a shout out to Resident Evil 1's final boss sequence, which begins by using some conveniently placed flares to grab the attention of Brad Vickers, the STARS Alpha Team helicopter pilot. Jill's throw in this game also utilizes a combat knife. Knives are one of the starting weapons in nearly every mainline Resident Evil game, eventually becoming a default gameplay function instead of a weapon that takes up an item slot. Knives are usually one of the weaker weapons in Resident Evil games, with knife-only runs of any given game becoming a popular self-imposed challenge among series fans. That said, there's a few games like Code Veronica and Resident Evil 2 Remake where the knife is actually absurdly good. Jill has a sliding attack done with down and heavy kick. This is a fast slide that can confirm into an OTG hit like her crouching light kick into a full combo. The opponent can roll away after being hit though, so do be mindful of that. Jill's first special move is Close Fighting A, done with a quarter circle forward and punch. Jill does a shoulder tackle that hits multiple times. This move hits in the air and also hits OTG. The heavy version of this move functions a bit differently. After doing the motion, hold heavy punch. Jill will start glowing, and once you let go of the button, she'll do an even stronger, more damaging tackle. This version will actually do more hits depending on how long you hold it, maxing out at 25 hits, though you need to hold it pretty long to do so, to the point of being impractical. Doing a dragon punch motion in punch has Jill pull out a grenade launcher. Jill fires a grenade into the air, the grenade trajectory depending on the strength of the punch button pressed. Jill can also delay the detonation of the grenade by holding down the punch button she used and letting go when you want it to explode, as long as you do it before it hits the opponent. This is the same grenade launcher Jill can obtain from Forrest's corpse early on in Resident Evil 1, though in some versions of the game it's called a bazooka. Return fire is Jill's counter, done with a half circle back and punch motion. Jill takes a brief defensive stance, and if she's attacked during this time, she'll shove the enemy away before dumping some bullets into the opponent. You can mash buttons to increase the number of times Jill retaliates as well. This move isn't taken from a specific ability in Resident Evil, but is likely a reference to a very common enemy interaction in Resident Evil. being grabbed by a zombie, pushing them off of you, and then shooting them multiple times in retaliation. Next up is Emergency Dodge A, done with the quarter circle back and kick. A zombie comes lumbering from behind Joe. The properties of said zombie differ depending on the strength of the kick button used for the motion. The light version can immobilize an enemy for a brief time, opening them up for a combo. Joe can also hit the zombie, causing them to trip and fall. If an opponent gets too close to them as they're briefly laying down, they'll get grabbed and put into the aforementioned capture state. The heavy version summons a flaming zombie. This one is slower and can't be interacted with the same way by Joe, but it does possess one standout property: it's unblockable. There's some pretty crafty setups out there involving the use of this zombie to create some inescapable situations. Next is Emergency Dodge B, done with the quarter circle forward and light kick. A zombie dog comes from behind Jill and runs at the opponent, somewhat similarly to Strider's Tiger formation. These dogs are Cerberus enemies, who appear in all 3 games in the PS1 Resident Evil trilogy, though they're perhaps best known for their jump scare in the first floor East Wing hallway in RE1. You may have noticed that both the regular zombies and the Cerberus here have splotches of green on them. This is supposed to be blood, but depicting it as such would have probably upped this game's age rating. That said, using green blood instead of red was an option included in the Resident Evil release a few months before Marvel 2, the Nintendo 64 port of Resident Evil 2, which gave you the option to use red, green, or blue blood. Emergency Dodge C is done with the quarter circle forward and heavy kick. This has a crow swoop in from above in a low arcing pattern, again not unlike Strider's Eagle formation attack in the same game. Like with the Cerberus, crows show up in a few Resident Evil 1 locations, but the most memorable area to me is on the balcony with Forrest's body and the grenade launcher. Staying in one place for too long will have the crows peck at you relentlessly. Jill's first hybrid combo is Close Fighting A+, done with the quarter circle forward in 2 punches. This is essentially a powered up version of her standard close fighting special move and can also be done in the air as well. She can combo into this from close fighting, but if you're doing it mid-screen during an air combo, only the first hit will cleanly combo into it. Doing a quarter circle forward motion in 2 kicks has Jill pull out her rocket launcher. This is the same rocket launcher that can be unlocked for infinite use in Resident Evil 1 by beating the game in a certain amount of time. Jill's third hybrid combo is Code T002, done with the quarter circle back in 2 kicks. Jill crouches and backs away before the Tyrant bursts out of the ground, slashing the opponent several times before disappearing. The Tyrant, codenamed T002, is a human bioweapon created by Umbrella for military use as a potential type of super soldier with near or equivalent intelligence to that of a human being. The T002 variant in particular is the one encountered in the first Resident Evil game, though other variants would appear in Resident Evil 0 and Umbrella Chronicles. There's also a Gold Tyrant that shows up as the final boss of the unlockable battle game mode that's exclusive to the Sega Saturn port of Resident Evil 1. There's an optional hyper combo extension for this move as well, End of Tyrant. As the Tyrant poses after slashing the opponent a few times, quickly do a quarter circle forward and kick motion, and Jill will shoot a single rocket at the Tyrant, killing it and scoring a little extra damage on the opponent. This doesn't do too much additional damage, but if the opponent is within chip kill range and the Tyrant doesn't kill them, it's a decent enough option to finish them off. This secret extension is also a reference to the final boss sequence of Resident Evil 1, where Brat drops a rocket launcher for Jill or Chris to use against the Tyrant, finishing it off in 1 hit. Jill's first assist is a healing assist. She'll hold out a potted plant, and if your character touches it, they'll recover a bit of health. The plant she's holding is the green herb from Resident Evil, herbs being the main way characters restore HP in that series. The ECG monitor from the Resident Evil games even pop up for a bit here. Sometimes, she'll be holding a pot with a green and red herb. This is the mixed herb item from Resident Evil, which fully restores health. It doesn't restore any more health than usual in Marvel 2 though. Her second assist is close fighting A. Her third assist is the light version of her grenade launcher. Here are all of her colors. Jill's next appearance in the Versus games would be in Marvel 2's direct sequel, Marvel vs. Capcom 3: Fate of Two Worlds. Her inclusion in this game is notable for a multitude of reasons. For one, she likely wasn't initially intended to make the roster. She was added to the game to balance out the roster count after Capcom managed to convince Marvel to let them add Chuma Gorath to the game, with Marvel's one stipulation being that Chuma be DLC, which likely influenced the decision to make Jill DLC as well. This also made Jill and Chuma the first purchasable DLC characters ever released for a Capcom fighting game. Going back to Jill specifically though, Jill is one of a handful of characters in the Capcom produced Versus games, Marvel, Tatsunoko or otherwise, to be completely redesigned from the ground up in terms of both character and moveset design. She joins the likes of Roll, who was redesigned between Marvel 2 and Tatsunoko vs. Capcom and was later joined by Frank West and Thanos, the former getting overhauled from Tatsunoko for Ultimate Marvel 3, and the latter getting redone between Marvel 2 and Marvel Infinite. Jill's moveset as well as her character design are sourced exclusively from Resident Evil 5 this time around, the most recent mainline Resident Evil game at the time of Marvel 3's development and release, and Jill's most recent appearance overall at that point in time. She very specifically seems to still be under Wesker's control in Marvel 3, and this informs her interactions with other characters in the game, as well as her overall moveset. Jill's English voice actor in Marvel 3 is Kari Wahlgren, who's done a metric ton of voice work in the industry, though some of her most recent roles include Mileena and Katana in Mortal Kombat 1, as well as Martha Kent in My Adventures with Superman. Jill's Japanese voice actor is Atsuko Yuya. This is somewhat notable in that Marvel 3 marks the first time Resident Evil characters received Japanese voice actors, the series only ever being dubbed in English beforehand. She'd go on to reprise her role in later Resident Evil games, which now receive Japanese dubs as well, including the HD release of the first game's 2002 remake, which now added a Japanese voice track. Jill's theme in Marvel 3 is a remix of Sad But True, Jill's boss theme in Resident Evil 5. It's a dance remix of the song, and while it's a departure from the orchestral, somewhat melancholy composition from Resident Evil 5, it fits the fast-paced nature of this game quite well. I think I like it just as much as the original piece. Jill is, for all intents and purposes, a completely different character in Marvel 3, and one of the most interesting from a mechanical standpoint. Her machine gun spray super has invincibility and will probably blow through most things. This also makes it a really good DHC tool as well. She's one of the faster characters in the game, and she has really good mobility overall. The command dashes she can do off of her Pharaoh crouch stance can enable all kinds of silly high-low and left-right mix-ups. That said, Jill infamously has something of an execution barrier. She's not the absolute hardest character in the game to play, but unlike Marvel 2, she's very much not a newcomer-friendly character. She also notably doesn't really have a reliable meterless answer to good zoning outside of using her mobility and hoping for the best. Outside of special moves and command normals, I'm also going to be highlighting a normal or two, as most of Jill's moveset on every level pretty faithfully recreates actions from a Resident Evil 5 moveset as both a boss and a playable character, as well as a few cutscenes. Let's start off with her launcher, which is based off of her sweep kick melee move in Resident Evil 5. Next is her standing heavy, which is based off of her Resident Evil 5 roundhouse kick. Jill's grounded and aerial throw is her net grab, which you got in Resident Evil 5 from shooting an enemy to make them kneel and melee attacking them from behind. Holding back and heavy attack gives you reverse roundhouse, which you got in Resident Evil 5 from shooting an enemy in the arm and then attacking from behind. Forward and heavy gives you sickle kick. Note the stance Jill takes after hitting the opponent. We'll get into this a little later. Jill's quarter circle forward and light attack is flip kick.
Not yet.
This is taken from her melee attack of the same name from Resident Evil 5, though it's somewhat rare to see, being a finisher attack that can usually only be done in co-op. Again, note the stand she takes afterwards. Jill's quarter circle forward and medium attack is cartwheel kick. This attack ground bounces, and like flip kick is strictly a co-op finishing move in Resident Evil 5. She also takes that aforementioned stance after this move as well. Her quarter circle forward and heavy attack is arrow kick. This attack initiates a wall bounce and is directly lifted from the cutscene immediately preceding the Jill and Wesker boss fight in Resident Evil 5. Okay, so I've already noted that crouching stance a few times, but what exactly is the deal there? Well, while in this stance, Jill has several offensive and mobility options she can initiate. She has a command dash that can be done by tapping either up, left, right, or diagonally forwards or backwards. This is Feral Crouch, and it can be manually initiated by pressing down, down, and the special button. She can cancel the stance by pressing the special button again. This stance's animation seems to be inspired by the second boss fight against her, where she's a lot more aggressive and, well, feral. She even hisses as she attacks if you listen closely enough. Let's look at some of her offensive options in Feral Crouch. First, by pressing light attack, she'll initiate low sweep, a low hitting kick. This one's interesting, in that she remains in Feral Crouch mode after doing it, which isn't the case for subsequent moves. Pressing medium has Jill do jumping roundhouse, which wall bounces.
First attack. Not yet.
This is taken from the cutscene right before Jill's solo boss fight in Resident Evil 5. Pressing heavy initiates her somersault attack.
Somersault!
First attack.
This attack is crucial for some of Jill's grounded combo extensions, as she can jump cancel it within the first few frames and can convert it into a longer combo from there. Quarter circle forward and any standard attack button in the air gives you double knee drop.
First attack.
The medium and heavy variants of this notably cause a ground bounce against airborne opponents. This is taken from a melee attack of the same name against grounded enemies in Resident Evil 5. Fallen Prey is done with a dragon punch motion and light attack on the ground.
First attack. Air combo.
This notably hits OTG and serves as a somewhat decent meterless combo ender to tack on at the end of an air combo. Dragon Punch in medium attack is ensnarement.
First attack.
This attack is directly lifted from, you guessed it, a Resident Evil 5 cutscene. Dragon Punch and heavy attack is position change. This is a side switch command grab somewhat similar to the one Yoon can utilize in Street Fighter. Jill's first hyper combo is Machine Gun Spray, done with a quarter circle forward and 2 attack buttons.
Maximum.
This move is very fast, very invincible, and can hit OTG. It needs to be spaced properly to be at its most effective though. The position of the opponent determines how many bullets are actually going to hit them. This one seems to be an aerial interpretation of her sweeping machine gun attack in a Resident Evil 5 boss fight.
Alright, and that's what we're gonna do.
This one is Raven Spike, done with a Dragon Punch motion in 2 attacks.
Die already!
This one slots a lot neater into Jill's ground-based bread and butter combos, thanks to the way damage is scaled during it. Jill's level 3 hyper combo is Mad Beast, done with a half circle back motion in 2 attacks. This is an install super that places her in an extended feral crouch state and gives her several benefits. All of her normals, command normals, and special moves are cancelable into her command dash, and she can now dash up to 3 times in a row and dash in the air as well. Her attacks also have more hit stun, and combined with the speed of her attacks in this mode in general, she can chain together attacks that she wouldn't be able to normally, like looping flip kick and the cartwheel kick. This is probably the most complex install super in the game, and a big part of the reason why she's considered to be a somewhat tricky character to pick up for beginners. Combine this with X Factor level 3, and she's easily one of the hardest characters in the game to reliably pilot outside of, say, Crimson Viper. Do note that in Mad Beast she can block but only low, since pressing back while grounded will just result in a teleport. The animation during the move's initiation is taken from the cutscene right before a boss fight in Resident Evil 5, and Mad Beast itself is also a reference to that boss fight, since she's also in an extended feral state during it. Her first assist is cartwheel kick.
Crossover first attack.
Not yet!
Crossover assist.
Her second assist is arrow kick.
First attack.
Not yet!
Crossover assist.
Not yet!
Her third assist is somersault.
Somersault!
Crossover first attack.
Here are Jill's colors. As we've already established, her design here is based off of her Resident Evil 5 appearance while being controlled by Wesker. In some of her win quotes and her endings though, she does appear to have broken free from said control. Her second color is a shout out to Saki from Quiz Naniro Dreams. Saki was notably an assist character in Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and became a full playable character in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. Her third color invokes the colors of Vanessa's and Terra Fusion costume from the woefully underrated PN03 on the GameCube. Her fourth color is a dark green suit meant to color coordinate with the similarly colored costumes given to Wesker and Nemesis in Marvel 3. Her fifth color is a pink outfit made to slot in with all of the other characters in the series who've gotten a pink color scheme, her Marvel 2 incarnation included. Her hair color was changed as to not mix it up with the Saki costume though. Her sixth color is based on Vanessa's standard costume in PN03. Jill's alternate costume is her iconic tube top and skirt combo from Resident Evil 3, though she still has Wesker's mind control device on her chest. Here are all of Jill's character interactions.
Enemies will be destroyed.
Something's come up. Gotta go.
Get ready to brawl.
You're expendable, Chris Redfield. Target acquired.
I choose, and I answer to no one.
Ready?
Ready to administer drugs to captive. Ready to seize mutant target.
Now you encounter real power.
Live and let die.
Mutant taken into custody. Ready for training.
Let's see how good you really are.
Ready?
My training's complete. spotted.
Get ready to brawl!
Target is down. Administering sedative.
And here's Joe's ending in both Fate of Two Worlds and Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And that's all she wrote for Miss Valentine. I think Jill occupies a pretty unique spot in the Capcom Vs. games. She's arguably the character that changed the most between entries, and she sort of depicts the evolution of the Resident Evil brand in the 11 years between Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and 3. I myself prefer her Marvel vs. Capcom 2 incarnation for essentially being a love letter to the first Resident Evil game in particular, but I can appreciate how intricately designed her Marvel 3 incarnation is, and how much they sourced from Resident Evil 5 for it. If we're ever lucky enough to get a new Marvel vs. Capcom game, you know there's gotta be a Resident Evil character or two, and I think seeing Jill return would be great. I wonder what incarnation would pop up in the future. A return to her Resident Evil 1 design? Maybe a moveset based on Resident Evil 3 Remake? All that said, that's going to do it for this video. This was kind of a trip down memory lane, since this was the very first Capcom vs. Legacy video I ever did, and I'm really happy I stuck with it long enough to be able to go back and do this episode justice in a way I wasn't able to when I started out. Hopefully you all enjoyed watching too. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.